Fines for rogue landlords and agents have surged past the £10 million mark, with over 19 council licensing schemes and consultations in London alone launched between New Year and April. The number of new measures introduced so far this year is 30% ahead of this time in 2023. In this video, I'm going to share with you 10 illegal mistakes that I see a lot of landlords making. I'm going to share also some real life stories, but do stick to the end, because if you are a seasoned landlord thinking that you have everything under control, think again. Stay tuned. For the purpose of this video, we're going to be talking about England. And as of this year, we know that there are over 170 regulations and laws that landlords need to abide by. So let's start up with gas safety certificate, which in the face of it is really insignificant in terms of what you pay to get a gas safety certificate. You get it probably around about £80 plus VAT. However, the fine, if you get this wrong, can go up to £6,000. And keeping your tenant safe shouldn't be the only reason that you want to get this right, because should you want to evict your tenant further down the line, you're going to have huge implications which is going to block you from evicting your tenant if you're having problems with collecting the rent or any other reason. An annual gas safety check should be conducted every year. It should be really easy because it's every year, every 12 months you probably renew your MOT, your insurance and so forth. So it should be quite easy to make sure that you don't miss this on a yearly basis. But you also need to ensure that this is done by a gas safety engineer, a registered engineer, and you should provide the gas safety certificate to your tenant before they move in. With the EICR, the electrical inspection report can be a little bit more challenging because this is done every 5 years and you're not going to have that muscle memory which you're going to be doing every 12 months. So since 2021, you do need to have an EICR, and this needs to be provided again to your tenant, ideally before the tenancy commences. Non-compliance with this one can lead to a £30,000 fine, but also having challenges in getting your property back, because you haven't been compliant and provided this to your tenant. After the tragic Grenfell Tower fire in London, smoke and carbon monoxide alarms have become even more important, and rightly so. And the government has the Smoke and Carbon Monoxide Alarm Amendment Regulations of 2022 and a guidance for landlords and tenants. A carbon monoxide alarm is required in every room that has a fixed combustion appliance. So this includes, for example, a boiler or a log burner or anything of that type. Now this comes with a £5,000 fine for non-compliance as well. Failure to register the deposit monies. Now this is the one that amazes me the most, because I have old school landlords that say to me,
Danny, but this is the way I've always done it for 20, 30 years. I keep the deposit and don't register anywhere.
And then I have to go on to explain that the laws and regulations do change, and failure to do so will come at a big consequence. In this circumstance, you can end up paying your tenant back 3 times the amount of this deposit if you haven't handled that carefully. And that doesn't just include registering it, by the way. It also requires you to provide all of the documentation, including the prescribed information form, tenancy deposit certificate, and the terms and conditions of the scheme. If you're finding this video helpful, hit that like button. It really keeps me motivated and pushing more of these videos for you. So this next one is even more challenging to keep on top of, because it's not every year or even 5 years, it's every 10 years. And this is the EPC, the Energy Performance Certificate, which you should have, by the way, before you even put it on the market, because it is a regulation to show the EPC to your prospective tenant before they even make an offer on the property. Now, whilst you actually have a tenancy on the property, it isn't required for you to have the EPC if you have the same tenant there, but it is best practice to make sure that you have that there for a variety of reasons. But most importantly, let's say you wanted to sell that property with the tenant in situ and you don't have an EPC, as an example, or even your tenant gives you notice because they're going to leave and you don't have an EPC ready to put the property onto the market. So just make sure you renew it when you have an opportunity, regardless of whether you do have a tenant in place. And failure to provide a valid EPC at the start of the tenancy can result in a fine of up to £5,000. And that is a fine that you want to avoid for the sake of not spending £150 for an EPC inspector to give you that certificate. The fact that there are over 170 laws and regulations to landlords absolutely means you should subscribe to this channel so you can keep up to date and not miss a thing. So there is an official document designed by the UK government to ensure that both landlords and tenants understand their rights when entering into a tenancy. That document is called a How to Rent Guide. Pretty simple, right? You have that document, you pass it on to your tenant every time you have a new tenant. Well, no, because the problem is the government updates this document regularly. So if you're not notified or keeping on top of the government website, you may miss this and provide your tenant with the complete wrong document, or old document in this case. And if that happens, well, you're going to have challenges. Should your tenant stop paying the rent, or you want to evict your tenant for whatever reason, you're going to have difficulties. Let's get into the meaty stuff. Ignoring council enforcement notice. So recently there was a buy-to-let landlord in North London who the tenant had made several complaints, and the council effectively went into the inspection and inspected the property and uncovered a range of hazards, including ventilation issues and broken electric heaters. Now, this case underscores the severe financial and legal consequences of neglecting the property maintenance and safety standards. This landlord was fined £9,000. Now, this case underscores the severe legal but also financial consequences of not keeping your property up to date. And together with ignoring council enforcement notice, you have failed to deal with a Category 1 hazard. So not addressing serious health and safety hazards in the property does come with fines up to £30,000. Category 1 hazard includes serious issues such as severe damp, excessive cold, structural issues, but also even fire and safety issues. Under the Housing Act 2004, landlords are required to address these hazards promptly. Failure to do so can result in substantial fines and potential even criminal charges. Additional HMO licensing particularly is the one that I see most landlords just turning a blind eye to, thinking, well, the council just won't find out and my tenants won't even know what's going on. Well, let's look at the definition of additional HMO licensing as per Camden in London. It applies to any property occupied by 3 or more people forming 2 or more households. It also applies to buildings converted into self-contained flats that do not meet the standards of the building regulation of 1991. Generally, when you apply for an additional HMO license, an inspector will visit the property and mainly be looking at health and safety issues and of course fire and safety. Now, if they find any challenges with your property and any modifications that you need, well, they typically give you 12 months to get it fixed as long as they are not serious issues. If they are serious issues, then you're probably going to have to fix that within a few weeks. So once you get that license, you would have to renew that every 5 years, and that's become quite expensive. However, a fine for not having this is even more expensive. And going back to those landlords who turn a blind eye thinking the council will never find out, well, get this. They are sending letters out to tenants, yes. The council is sending out letters to tenants, incentivizing them to call out those landlords who have properties rented to 3 or more tenants forming more than one household who share facilities like bathrooms, kitchens that do require this HMO license. And get this, failing to comply may result in hefty fines, but most importantly, you having to repay your tenant up to 12 months rent, and that's the incentive to call you out. Last and certainly not least is our jobs as immigration officers. Yes, the right to rent checks, which you have to do before you grant a tenancy to any tenant. And this will come with fines with anything between £10,000 and even £20,000 for those repeat offenders. As a landlord, you have to conduct these right to rent checks, which include, but not exclusively, looking at making sure that they have a UK passport. If they don't, then that they have a visa, the biometric residency, but also potentially a certificate of naturalisation or registration, and if the tenant is outside the UK, valid visa or immigration status document. Now, the document authenticity, the photograph matches the tenant's appearance, and the dates are valid. The tenant's date of birth are consistent with all of these documents. So there you have it, 10 illegal mistakes that I see landlords making all the time. And do make sure you subscribe as we see more of these regulations coming out from the woodworks from Labour. Stay tuned.